The storm came from nowhere, or perhaps from somewhere very specific indeed. One moment the stars wheeled cold and clear above the merchant vessel. The next, clouds boiled across the heavens like ink spilled in water, and the sea rose up in walls of black glass. The crew screamed prayers to gods who did not answer, and the ship groaned as ancient timbers split beneath the fury of waters that seemed almost guided. Kane felt it, the bloodstone ring throbbing with sickly, necrophagous light against his finger, keening like a trapped soul as it resonated with something beneath the waves, something old, something that had been waiting. The rocks came out of the darkness like teeth, and the ship died screaming. When the grey dawn broke over the northern coast, Kane walked out of the surf onto a shore that no European map had ever marked. The water streamed from his massive frame, but he was not wet. The cold could not touch him, had not touched him since the garden. Behind him, the wreckage of the merchant vessel broke apart in the churning waters, and the bodies of sailors who had been wise enough to leave him alone tumbled in the foam. Before him rose monoliths, black stones, ancient beyond reckoning, arranged in patterns that hurt the eye if one looked too long. They predated the tribes who would one day fish these waters. They predated the things that swam beneath. They were old when Kane was young, and Kane had never been young. He stood among them, his red hair plastered to his skull, his ice-blue eyes reading the angles and the shadows. And he understood. This was a threshold, a place where the veil grew thin, a place where things could pass between worlds. The bloodstone throbbed against his finger, not toward the sea, but inland, northwest, toward something that called to the ring like blood calling to blood. Kane drew his hood over his eyes and began to walk. Behind him, the reef that had killed his ship would one day bear a name, Devil Reef. And the town that would rise beside it, Innsmouth, would learn to worship the very things that had drawn Kane to this shore. But that was centuries away. For now, there was only the ring and the trail and the demon that had dared to deceive him. 3 days through forest primeval, following the necrophagous pulse of the Bloodstone. The land was old in ways that Europe had forgotten. Trees that had never known an axe, rivers that had never turned a mill, darkness between the trunks that held memories of ice ages and elder things. Kane moved through it like a ghost, leaving no trail, needing no rest, his spirit sight painting the world in hues that mortal eyes could never perceive. He saw the residue of passage, the demon's trail, yes, but also something else. A web of corruption spreading through the valley ahead, centered on a point where the Bloodstone's pulse grew strongest. And threading through that corruption, a single line of blazing white fire. Someone else was hunting. On the fourth day, Kane crested a ridge and looked down upon the Miskatonic valley. There should have been nothing here. No settlement, no colony, no mark of European presence. The official charts showed only wilderness, and the native tribes spoke of this place only in whispers, calling it the place where the sky once bled. But Kane's eyes saw what maps could not record. Stone houses of blasphemous angles, timber fortifications black with age, a church steeple rising above the trees like a crooked finger pointing accusation at the heavens. Though what god was worshipped within those eldritch walls, Kane could well guess. The settlement hugged the river like a tumor, hidden from the world by leagues of lethal forest, and, his spirit sight told him, by workings of concealment that would turn away any eye not meant to find this place. Arkham, the ghost colony, the new Babylon. The Bloodstone throbbed in eager recognition, and Kane began his descent into the Valley of Shadow. Solomon Kane rode north with hell at his heels and damnation in his eyes. The horse beneath him was a dead man's mount, gifted by creatures wearing human skin, and he spurred it forward nonetheless. Let them herd him. Let them think him cattle for the slaughter. The wolf does not fear the fold. The wolf feeds in the fold. A decade he had hunted the demon across this savage continent. A decade of jungle and swamp, of savage tribes and corrupted colonists, of horrors that would have broken lesser men. The thing that had fled Africa in innocent flesh had grown fat on the New World's blood. And everywhere Solomon walked, he found its spoor. Villages emptied, children taken, altars stained with offerings to gods whose names predated Scripture. The children of Asshur, that was what they called themselves, the demon's servants, its hands in the world of men. They had tried to stop him in the southern colonies. They had tried to break him in the fever swamps. They had set skin wearers upon him at Shepherd's Rest, and he had climbed their mountain and broken their hollow vessel with steel and prayer. Now they herded him north, toward their stronghold, toward the trap they thought would finally end the white wolf's hunt. Let them. He felt them in the trees, the skin wearers, pacing him through the forest, wearing the faces of the settlement's dead. They did not attack, not yet. They were guiding him, channeling him toward the killing ground of their choosing. Solomon's hand found the pistol at his hip, and his lips moved in silent prayer. Not for deliverance. He had long since stopped asking for that. He prayed only for strength enough to reach the demon's throat before his own was cut. The forest opened onto a bridge, rough timber spanning the river that the natives called Miskatonic, the river that remembers. Beyond it, through the morning mist, Solomon could see the steeple of a church and the rooftops of a settlement that should not exist. Arkham. The skin-wearers emerged from the tree line. There were 7 of them, wearing the faces of farmers and merchants, of wives and children, all the stolen dead of Shepherd's Rest and a dozen settlements before. They moved wrong, joints bending at angles that living flesh could not achieve, and their eyes held nothing but hunger and ancient malice. Solomon dismounted. The horse, wise in the way of animals, fled into the trees. He drew his rapier in his right hand, his pistol in his left, and faced the creatures that had come to end his hunt. "Come then," he said, his voice cold as a headsman's iron. "I have walked through the shadow of death from Africa to this benighted shore. I have broken your vessels and scattered your priests. If this bridge is to be my ending, I shall make it an ending worthy of the gallows ballads." The skin-wearers rushed forward, and the silence of the Miskatonic was shattered by a sound like the crack of doom. A bolt of emerald levin fire, ghastly and unholy, leaped from the forest eaves. The foremost creature did not merely die, it disintegrated. Stolen flesh and ancient rot erupted in a spray of stinking mist as the sorcerous impact punched a jagged crater through its ribs. The second spun, its head simply gone, vaporized by a force that crackled with dying emerald fire. The third and fourth died reaching for weapons they would never draw, their bodies hurled backward by impacts that left smoking craters in dead flesh. Solomon did not freeze. A decade of horror had burned such hesitation from his soul. His pistol barked, and the nearest creature's eye socket became a ruin of black ichor. His rapier was a streak of silver lightning, thirsty for the blood of the abyss, and it drank deep from the throat of the next abomination. He spun to face whatever new devil had entered the fray. The stranger emerged from the forest like something from the oldest nightmares, massive, red-haired, his left hand still raised and crackling with dying sorcery. His face was shadowed by a hood, but Solomon could see the eyes. Ice blue, cold as the glaciers that had ground the world to dust in ages past. Eyes that held the weight of epochs and the memory of the first blood ever spilled. Silence fell upon the bridge. 2 hunters stood among the scattered dead, weapons raised, eyes locked across the morning mist. Kane the Puritan stared into those eyes, blue as the glaciers that ground the world to dust, and felt a cold wind from the stars sweep across his soul. He did not see a man. He saw an epoch. He recognized the brand upon that brow, hidden beneath the hood, but blazing to his spirit like a sigil seared by the finger of God when the world was yet red with the blood of the first murder. the mark, the original brand, the handwrite of Jehovah upon the first killer. His pistol did not waver, but something shifted behind his gray eyes, something that had been iron rigid for 40 years of wandering, cracking at the foundations. The giant studied him in return, those winter ice eyes narrowing. Whatever he saw made him go still, in a way that had nothing to do with caution. "You see it," the immortal said, his voice deep and ancient as stone grinding upon stone. "Most men look away. Most men flee. You stand there, and you see it." Solomon's voice was a low iron rasp, the voice of a man who had looked upon horrors from Africa to this savage shore, and never once flinched. "I know thee, Kane of old." The words hung in the air like a pronouncement of doom. The immortal's massive frame went rigid. "I see the mark of the Lord of hosts upon thy brow," Solomon continued, and his voice did not tremble. "I see 10,000 years of wandering written in the lines of thy face. I see the weight of the first blood carried across ages while empires rose and fell like waves upon the shore." He lowered his pistol, not in surrender, in recognition. "Yet I see also his strange and terrible forbearance. If the Lord of hosts has seen fit to let thee tread this earth while empires turn to ash, I shall not be the one to question his dark patience." The immortal flinched. It was small, a flicker across that ageless face. But Solomon saw it. For 10 millennia, this creature had used those eyes as a wall, a barrier to keep humanity at bay. He had expected terror or hatred, or the hollow bravery of men who did not truly understand what they faced. He had not expected acceptance. "Then you know I am damned," Cain said, something raw beneath the ancient weariness. "Cursed by the God you serve, enemy of all that is holy." Solomon shook his head slowly, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of revelation, the iron certainty of a man whose faith had just been hammered into diamond. "If Jehovah wished thee destroyed, thou wouldst have been dust before the flood. If he wished thee forgotten, thy name would not be written in the book I carry against my heart." He stepped forward, his gray eyes meeting those winter ice depths, without fear, without flinching, the gaze of a man who had walked through the shadow of death and found it wanting. "Thy eyes do not terrify me, they fortify me. For if the Lord of hosts has the patience to keep a killer like thee walking for an eternity, then he has the mercy to guide a sinner like me through this single night." The immortal stared at him. In 10,000 years, no one had ever spoken to him thus. He had been feared, worshipped, hunted, and cursed. He had been called monster and demon and god. But never, never had anyone looked upon the mark and seen not damnation, but testament. And in that moment, looking at this gaunt Puritan who burned with borrowed fire, Kane the Immortal saw something that shook the foundations of his millennia-long argument with heaven. He saw his own reflection. Not the killer, not the cursed. He saw a wanderer, driven by an urge he could not name, walking roads he did not choose, unable to stop until some purpose he could not articulate was fulfilled. The same restlessness, the same iron drive, the same inability to rest while evil walked the earth. Solomon Kane was his echo, a mortal mirror of the curse he had carried since the garden. And if this man could carry that burden for a single lifetime and call it faith, what did that make Kane's 10,000 years of refusal? The bloodstone throbbed on his finger, pulling toward Arkham, toward the demon that had deceived him. The hunt was not over. The trap still waited. The children of Asshur still schemed in their ghost colony. But for the first time in an age, Kane the Immortal did not feel alone. "You hunt the demon," he said. It was not a question. "Aye," Solomon confirmed, "and it seems the Master of Destinies has woven our paths into a single dark tapestry." The Immortal's lips twisted, not quite a smile, but something close, something that had not touched that face in centuries. "The demon deceived me," Kane said. "Fed on me, used me to escape its prison. I do not hunt it for your God, Puritan. I hunt it because nothing in all creation has ever made a fool of me and lived." "Then we walk the same road," Solomon said, "whatever our reasons. The Lord of Hosts often uses broken instruments to achieve his purpose, and stranger alliances have been forged in the shadow of the gallows." He extended his hand, the hand that had held the rapier, the hand that had sent countless evils screaming back to the pit. "Solomon Kane," he said, "called the White Wolf by those who have seen my work." The Immortal looked at the hand, looked at the man, and for the first time since he had strangled the life from his brother in the shadow of Eden, Kane reached out and clasped the hand of another in something other than violence. It was a grip of iron and ancient strength, a pact made in the shadow of the gallows, sealed in the blood of abominations. "Kane," he said simply, "just Kane." Two Kanes, two wanderers, two broken instruments. Before them, the ghost colony of Arkham waited in the mist, its Stygian rooftops and blasphemous angles shrouded in eldritch fog. And within its walls, the demon Moloch fed upon the faithful while the Marsh family prepared their sacrifice. The hunt was not over. It was only beginning.